Your motion graphics will never be the same after learning this.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
So we're in After Effects here, and the first thing we're going to do is create a new composition, and we will label this Working 1 Comp. We will change the dimensions to 1920 by 1080. We'll leave the frame rate at 24 frames per second, and then we're going to change the duration here to 10 seconds long. All right, so here's what we have to start. We're going to drag this into our working folder, and we're going to pull down some of our assets. And I actually have one other asset I need to bring in. It's actually our Philosopher asset. All this is a Photoshop file. I'm just dragging in here. And when it comes to bringing in Photoshop files, bring in the whole file and make sure you import it as a composition. Yours might say something different, but make sure you import it in as a composition. So that is what we have right here. And in this comp, you see we have 3 different layers. We have our original, which was full HD. We don't need that. We have our new background, and then we have our Philosopher. And as you can see here, this is actually a 4K size comp. So I just wanted to scale the size so we had a little bit more flexibility to play with while still maintaining some resolution. We're gonna go back into our working comp here, and what we're gonna do is actually take both of these assets, copy them, and paste them into our working comp. And right now, everything's like way too huge because like I said, these are 4K assets and we're working in a full HD comp. In order to caveat that, I'm going to scale them both down to 50%. And then all I'm gonna do is click on each one, and then I'm gonna use the Align tool to center them up so they are proportionate to the composition. And you'll know they're proportionate because the bounding box of each asset is within the bounding box of the frame of the composition. What we're gonna do to start is set up our scene. So with all that being said, I'm going to bring in our 11 Labs track, and I'm gonna show you guys a cool little shortcut here. I'm gonna click L, and you see the audio levels where you can kind of adjust how loud or low you want things to be. But if I double tap it, LL, you see the waveform, which is really nice because we're not going to be leaving this track on the entire time. It'll just get annoying, so we're going to leave markers instead. So with that being said, let's listen to what we have.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
All right, now that we heard the audio track, I want to bring you guys into my creative process. How am I going to approach an edit like this with one AI generated image and this track? What do we do? How do we go from here? Well, I'm going to make it really simple for you. I'm going to show the sentence on screen and just walk you through briefly how we're going to approach this edit. So this philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. We are starting to talk about the philosopher. So I want to start tight on the philosopher. I want to show him up close. He was teaching. That's an emphasis on that word, teaching. So I want to show the word teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom. All right, when I see that, I see a contrast between where the philosopher is, which is tight, and then where it's going to be, which is showing the full image, showing the wide shot. And conversation was the curriculum. Similar to teaching, there's an emphasis on this line to me, and I actually want to write out that whole sentence. This was a really simple way to break it down, but when you're working with voiceover and animation and graphics, really try to dissect the words because it's going to help tell your story from a visual perspective. And we are going to leave some markers. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. We're going to listen to this audio track, and then we're going to use the star button. Now, if you're not sure where that is, or if you don't have that or can't find it, you can go to Layer, Markers, Add Marker, and then right away, this little thing pops up. So we'll just listen to this real quick.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching.
So teaching starts right here. So I'm going to set a marker right here. I'll double click on it, and I'm going to just write teaching, and I'll change the color of this to something like yellow.
Teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom.
All right, so this was the classroom. As we said, we're going to do a transition here. So I'm just going to set another marker, and we're just going to call this reveal. And we'll give this another fun color like cyan.
This was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
All right, so what I want to do here is set another marker, and we're going to put final call out. We'll change this to fuchsia. All right, and last thing I realized is that I'm starting tight on the philosopher, and this is a lot of time. It's almost 3 seconds. So I wanted to put some sort of emphasis on the philosopher himself. So let me just listen to this line.
This philosopher wasn't just talking.
So right around here, I'm just gonna put a marker, and I'm gonna put call out. It might be a name, it might be a fun little animation. We'll have to wait and see. But we're just gonna put some sort of call out marker because we want to keep things moving and flowing. For now, we're going to deselect the sound because it'll get annoying listening to me in that at the same time. All right, so with that being said, what we're gonna do is pre-comp our Philosopher. I'm gonna right click here, pre-comp here, and I'm just gonna call this Philosopher pre. And we'll move all attributes in a new composition. And then we're gonna do the same thing for the background. Background pre. And we're doing a bunch of pre-comps in today's tutorial just to keep things nice and organized. And it'll all make sense later. Okay, now what we want to do is set up our 3D scene. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Camera. We'll use a 35mm camera. We'll leave it at 2 node, and we will press OK. It's going to give you that warning. That's because these are not 3D objects yet. Now I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null, and I'm going to call this camera controller 1. I'm going to make that 3D, and then I'm going to parent the camera to the controller. Now with the background here, I want to push this back in Z space by something like 8,000 pixels. And then with the Philosopher here, I'm going to push him back to something like 5,000 pixels. And if none of this is making sense, or if this is the first tutorial of mine you've seen, I've created a bunch more on how to actually use parallaxing and why use 3D space and whatnot. So I'll make sure to link those in the description below if you want to check those out. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is actually just scale things back up to proportion. So I'm just gonna scale this back up. All right, that looks good. And I know that it's scaled up to proportion because I'm looking at this bounding box here and where it is in relation to the edge of the composition. So if I just keep scaling it up here, I know like, cool, 5, 28, nope, let's say 530, boom. That is where it needs to be. And then with our Philosopher, we also need to scale him up a good bit, like this. I'm actually going to scale up the Philosopher just a little bit larger. I know in the original photo, he was staying right here on this rock. I'm just going to scale him up just a little bit more. What we're going to do now is with our camera controller, we're actually going to zoom in. So I press P on the keyboard here, and I'm zooming in tight. And you see this distance between the actual Philosopher in the background. That's because we're doing some parallaxing here. So anything that's closer to the camera is going to move faster than something that's further. And I'm just going to pull things up here, and I kind of want to align and see where I want him to be. Now I'm going to show you guys a little shortcut how to figure out where exactly you want to get your alignment. What I'm going to do is turn on proportional grid. And if you're familiar with the rule of thirds, it's a very popular design and photography technique. And I was able to pull it up just right here. If your grid looks differently, all you need to do is go to Edit, Preferences, Grids and Guides. And then right here, you see proportional grid. Change yours to 3 and 3, and you can change the color to whatever it is. All right, so I like the way this looks, so I'm going to get rid of our proportional grid. And the next thing I'm going to do is do some subtle movement just to keep things flowing. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null. I'm going to label this Camera Controller 2. I'll make this 3D. And then what I'm going to do is parent our Camera Controller 1 to our Camera Controller 2. Right, because we have our camera parented to the controller 1, so everything's just kind of building. And what we're going to do here is I'm just going to press P for position, set a keyframe, go down, and slide across like this. And I'm going to bring it all the way to the end and just see how this looks. All right, I'm going to just play with this here. If I want to make it faster, I'll bring it further across. Now that's actually a little too fast, so I'm going to bring it back just a little bit. So things are heading in the right direction, but now what we need to do is actually get some sort of call out made to emphasize our Philosopher here. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. One way I like to do it is with the stroke circle, which I've used in other tutorials of mine. It's really fun. I created this in Photoshop, and I just use it all the time. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to drag this asset to its own composition, and it's labeled stroke circle right away. I'm going to turn on transparency so we can see what we're looking at here. And now what we're going to do is actually trace the outline of the stroke circle using our pen tool. So right now we have our stroke selected and nothing for the fill. And I'm just going to start tracing the outline of this. Now what I'm going to do is drop down here, add a trim path, go to end, set a keyframe, and then go up to about 1.5 seconds, and then set that to 100. The next thing we're gonna do is highlight our keyframes here. I have this plugin called Flow where I can automatically apply a preset and it just does the easing for me. If you don't have this, I'm gonna show you guys quickly how to do this. I will highlight the keyframes, click F9, you go to your graph editor here, you bring in both your handles just a little bit, and you adjust them to your liking. But I have the plugin, so I'm gonna use it. This is the first animation. Looks good, but what I wanna do is just adjust this outside line just a little bit. And so I'm going to shrink it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to add a roughen edges. And with that, I'm going to change the border to something like 20. I'm going to change the scale to 12. And then I'm going to change the complexity to 10. And all this is doing is making this look like a little bit more hand-drawn, like it was from a paintbrush or like kind of frayed pen or something like that. Just, you want to make things looking perfect. And then I'm also going to add an expression to the evolution here. So I'm going to hold Alt and click, and then I'm going to type in posterize time 3 followed by time 1000. So now it's going to be these random edges that are just moving at a fast pace. Now what I want to do is actually matte our stroke circle to what we're going to call stroke circle matte. So I'll parent it right away, and now here is our beautiful reveal. Looks pretty nice, right? Really simple stuff. Done this a million times. So next thing we're gonna do is actually duplicate these. I'm gonna bring them up, and I'm gonna change the color of these to yellow. And what I'm gonna do here is go to our stroke circle. I'm going to apply a fill effect, and I'm gonna change the color here from the default red to this yellow. Here's the hex code that I'm using. And then what I need to do now is actually offset the actual animation so we could see it better. So I'm gonna go to something like 4 keyframes, and then I'm going to bring this down here. And then now we're gonna have the black followed by the yellow line, just like that. Now, if we wanted to be able to see the roughen edges just a little bit more, all I would do is go to our stroke circle matte, and I would just drop down the size to something maybe like 40, and then I would do the same for the one below it, 40. And then maybe we could see the edges just a little bit better and how they're moving. Really subtle stuff, but just wanted to point that out there. Now we're gonna go back to our working one comp. And what I'm gonna do is take our stroke circle, I'm gonna bring it in here, I'm gonna change it to 3D, and then I'm going to push this back 5,000 pixels in Z space. So it's all the way over here. We're just going to drag it up, bring it around. And we need to scale this down a little bit too. Cool, this looks good, but I don't like how oval the stroke circle looks. It just looks a little odd. And rather than like redrawing it in Photoshop and bringing in a whole new one and repeating that process, all I'm gonna do here is break the chain on the scale. And then I'm going to just bring this in here. And now all it's doing is allowing me to change the scale of the x-axis and the y-axis independently. So now I can make it a little bit more of what I want it to be. And I'm gonna rechain it, just make it a little bit larger as a whole. It's pretty cool. Now, one thing I wanna do to actually, just to make this look a little bit different, is that I know our Philosopher is at 5,000 Z space, and the stroke circle we just brought in is at 5,000 Z space as well. So they are on the same plane. They're moving the same way with the subtle animation we have going on. What I'm gonna do to just kind of change this up a little bit, I'm gonna change our stroke circle Z space to something like, let's say 4,500. And it just does a little bit of parallaxing, and that's exactly what I'm looking for, so we're going to keep it. So I like the way this call out looks, but the next thing I wanna do is actually animate in the Philosopher. I feel like we see him for too long, so I just wanna mix it up a little bit. So we're going to double click on our Philosopher pre-comp here. I'm gonna bring in some fun transitions that I had created. It's part of my new transition pack, and these are fun transitions that you could really use for any project here. So I'm going to bring in this one, Luma 4, and I'll bring in Luma 1, which we will use later. So for Luma 4 here, here's how this looks. It just animates in from left to right. It's really nice. What I'm gonna do here is scale this down. I'm going to type in -90, so it goes straight up. And then I see that it covers the Philosopher fully. I'll drop down transparency just to make sure. Yeah, that looks good. So we're gonna animate him in with this fun little matte here. In order to do that, what I'm gonna do is go to our Philosopher here. I'm going to track matte to our matte right here. And now he animates in just like that, but he drops off. And that's because we need to extend the end of this layer. So I'm going to right click here, time, freeze on last frame. So now when he animates in, he will stay on screen. It's very important that you do that, otherwise things are just gonna start dropping out left and right. Now with our Philosopher here, the way he kind of blends into the comp, it's just the way the AI generated it. It looks fine, but I wanna make him look just a little bit brighter, just to stand out a little bit. So I'm going to add a curves effect, and I'm just gonna brighten him up a good bit. Can add a little bit of contrast back. Yeah, he stands out just a little bit more, and that's what I wanted to see. All right, so here's what we have so far. We still need to work on this a little bit. So I'm gonna go back to our Philosopher pre-comp here. I'm actually going to duplicate this. I'll drop these below. I'm gonna change our top Philosopher, the one that's in color, to a different color, like orange. And we are going to hide this guy. And with our bottom one, we're going to add a black and white effect. I'm gonna delete the curves. And I'm actually going to add a levels effect. And all I'm gonna do with this is I'm just gonna give him some really unique looking contrast and make him almost look like a statue. That looks pretty cool. All right, now what I wanna do is turn on our colored Philosopher and then go up about 10 frames here, offset the keyframe. So now we have the black and white one followed by the colored one. Nice, that looks pretty cool. Now I want to go back to our working comp here. Here's what we have. Okay, so it's looking better, but right now the circle's coming on a little too soon, and I don't want to adjust the timing of it. I want to adjust the timing of the Philosopher. So I kind of want our Philosopher like to be almost at the circle, like right around here. So what I'm going to do is just bring this in a little bit and then click back. Yeah, that looks good. The next thing we need to do is create our callout for teaching. So I'm gonna go back to our project window here. I'm gonna go back to assets. I'm gonna create a new composition, and I'm just gonna call this teaching callout. We'll keep all of the settings the same. Click OK. What I'm gonna do is type out the word teaching, and we're gonna use a fun font called Fang, which I will link in the description below if you want it. And I'm going to make this all caps. There's no bold option, so just a little tip for you guys. If you like a font but you want it to be like a little bit bolder, there's this faux bold right here. So you just press that, and then it makes it a little bit more bold. All right, cool. We have this fun Romanish looking font. So now it's time to animate it just to make it a little bit more fun. So I'm going to drop down our arrow here. I'm going to add an opacity animator. And then I'm going to change this to 0% opacity, go down to arrange selector, set a keyframe from start, and then go down to about a second and bring that up all the way. So this is a very simple animation, but we could spice this up a little bit more. I'm gonna go down to advanced here. I'm gonna change the smoothness to 50%. And what that's going to do is see how things are kind of like slowly like kind of fading in. It's just gonna make it a little bit more like a typewriter. If I change it to 0, it will be a typewriter. All right, and I don't want it to be like that. So I'm gonna change it to something like 50, so it's just a little bit more subtle. All right, this looks good so far, but there's more to be done. So I'm gonna click on our text again. I'm going to animate and add blur. I'm gonna change the blur to something like 15. So that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go to arrange selector here, and I'm gonna go and set a keyframe for the start and the end, just like this. I'll click U, just so we see only our keyframes, and here's what we got. All right, this doesn't look bad, but I feel like it's kind of hard to see the blur. So in order to see it just a little bit better, I'm gonna offset these keyframes by 4 frames. And I'm also gonna highlight all of them. I'm gonna click F9 to easy ease. All right, so this text is looking cool, but there's one last little bit of sauce I wanna put on this text, and that is a wiggly animation. So I'm gonna go down to our text again. I'm going to bring in a position animator, all right? And then while staying clicked on this, I'm going to add a wiggly selector. With the wiggly selector, I'm going to change our wiggles per second to 0, our correlation to 0, and then I'm going to change the position here to 2, then 3. Then I'm going to put in an expression here, so I'm going to hold on Alt, click on random seed, I'll type in posterized time 3, random 1000. So now we have this fun little text wiggle. Just to show you guys what it looks like, I'll stretch this out here. So now we have this text bouncing up and down. Now, if this is like way too much bounce for you, all you need to do is go down to this position right here, change that to maybe like 1 and 2, x-axis, y-axis. Now it's just a little bit more subtle. I actually like that, so we're gonna keep that the way it is. But now what we need to do is add a fun little box to animate in from behind the actual word itself. So I'm going to change the composition background just so we could see it a little bit better to like a dark red. All right, and then I'm going to change the color of the text to yellow. And then I'm going to bring up our pen tool and I'm going to change this to black. And I'm going to set a point here, hold down shift and set a point here. I'm gonna increase the stroke. And then I'm going to align this to the center and I'm going to align the word to the center. I'll drop it below. Boom. And now what we're gonna do is actually animate the stroke of the box itself. So I'm gonna drop this down here, go to add trim paths, bring the endpoint to 0, set a keyframe, go up a second, and bring that up all the way. And then I'm going to highlight our keyframes, click F9 to use ease. So here's what we have. Now, what I'm gonna do is actually offset this just by a couple keyframes here. Now, if you wanted to keep it the same and you're like, but I don't want to see the text before the box, all you need to do is mat the actual text to the box itself. Now things will only show within the box since you matted it. But I'm going to offset the keyframes anyways. So here's what we have. All right, I love the way this looks here, but the next thing we're going to do is add a roughen edges effect to the box to make it just a little bit more imperfect. So all we're going to do for that is we're going to go back to our stroke circle. I'm going to go back to our effect controls here and go up to our matte, copy the roughen edges effect, and then paste it onto here. And you can see it looks just a little bit more imperfect. And if we want, we can mess with it just a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good. Now what we need to do is actually bring this into our working comp. So I'll go here, we have our teaching call out. I'll bring this in, and then I'm going to make it 3D. And then right away, you can't see it because it's somewhere else, it's not here. So I'm going to click P for position and I'm going to put this in Z space at 5,000. So now we at least can see it. All right, this is looking better. I'm going to now shrink this just a little bit. Now, because we brought up the stroke circle just a little bit ahead of the philosopher, it's also going to be ahead of the word teaching because it's at the same Z space. And I kind of like this depth. But if you're not about it, then all you need to do is just adjust where you want it to be, and it could be on top. All right, so I need to drag this teaching call out down to somewhere like 2 seconds here. All right, so let's take a look and see what we got to do next.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom.
All right, this was the classroom. What we need to do for that is do some sort of reveal. I'm going to deselect our audio here. And where he says this is a classroom is like right around this point. So for our camera controller 1, I'm going to set a keyframe right here. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to set another keyframe right here. With our second keyframe, I'm going to click on it, right click here and go to reset. So things are at the default parameters for the null, but it looks really weird and it's going to do this weird zoom thing. But no, that looks hideous. We're not doing that. Usually in my tutorials, I will do a zoom out or a zoom in, but I want to make things just a little bit different. So we're going to do a hard cut. So I'm going to click on our keyframes here, right click, toggle, hold keyframe. So now it holds and then it goes to the actual next shot. But this still isn't acceptable. We're not trying to, yeah, I don't know what that is. So what we're going to do is mess with the second keyframe a little bit. I'm just going to punch in here and I'm going to make some adjustments. And keep in mind, we still have that continuous movement going left to right. So I don't want to use the original image where it's completely zoomed out all the way because then we are going to get some of those black edges. All right, so let's turn the audio back on and let's see how this looks.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
Awesome. So now I know, I have my final call out here, and I'm actually going to write out that full sentence. So all I'm going to do is duplicate our teaching call out, and I'm just going to call this final call out. And then I'm going to paste in the sentence. I'm zipping through this because we've already done this before. I'm just aligning things up, adjusting the stroke. I want to make sure these things are aligned in relation to one another. Okay, now they are. So now what I want to do is actually just invert these colors here. So I'm going to take our yellow, from our text, and I'm going to paste it on here, and then I'm going to just change this to black. And for this, maybe I don't want the wiggle, so all I'm going to do is go down to the text here, and I'm going to just hide animator 3, and then now we'll see how this looks. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. All right. Now I'm going to go to our working folder here, go back to our project window, and then we're going to pull up our final callout. And then we're going to set it in Z space by 3000. We're going to scale it up. And I want it to animate in right where this marker is. So I'm just going to drag this pre-comp to the start of that marker. That looks all right. I want to make some adjustments here. One, I want to scale this up and just make it a little bit more centered. It's not going to be perfect because the composition itself is going to be continuously moving. Now what I want to do is go down here, and I'm just actually going to stretch out these keyframes just a little bit. Also delay the box a little bit. All right, so with all that being said, let's take a look at everything we have so far.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
As far as I know, this edit is good. But the thing is that in the example, there was a lot more flair to it, a lot more secret sauce. And I know that's why y'all are here. I know that's why you subscribed. I know that's why you're leaving lovely comments and liking this video. So I'm gonna show you guys how to pull off some of that secret sauce to bring this edit to the next level. First thing we're gonna do is jump into our background here. And we're gonna create some fun little lines all throughout the entire animation itself. So I'm gonna pull up our pen tool here, and we have our stroke. We already have our yellow selected. And I'm going to change this to something like, let's say 5. And I'm going to zoom in with my mouse wheel, and I'm going to just start drawing lines. And it's going to be kind of random. And right away, it creates a shape layer. I'm going to click on that shape layer again, and I'm going to keep drawing lines. The thing is that if I'm not clicked on the shape layer, it's going to keep creating new layers, and we can actually do all of these lines on one layer. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to keep keeping it pretty random, and I'm going to, for this tree, it's going to be like that, but I'm also going to do the outline of the tree and maybe some of these branches, just like that. So there's a lot more I want to trace. I want to trace the mountains, the buildings, the people, all of that stuff, but you're kind of getting the gist of it. I'm going to just zip through this. You guys can see the process, but then I'll show you guys how to animate it. All right, that was a lot of tracing and a lot of lines. In fact, it was 34 of them. But anyways, what we're gonna do now is animate them. So I'm going to click on our shape layer here. I'm going to add a trim pass. All right, and what I'm gonna do is bring this all to the end, and you'll see all of the lines go away. I'll click a keyframe here, and I'm gonna go up to 1 second, and I'll bring it to 100. So now we have everything animating in like that. Now, the reason why they're all animating in relation to this one trim path is because this trim path is outside of all these shapes. But if you wanted to, you could drag your trim paths and put it in an actual shape, and then it will only impact one of them. We're not doing that, but I wanted to show you guys what you could do with it. So now what we're going to do here is go down to our trim paths. I'm going to go back, let's say 8 frames. I'm going to set a keyframe for start, and then I'm going to go up a second. And then I'm gonna bring this up to 100. All right, so I like the way our animation looks, but we need to change up the pacing a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is highlight our keyframes, click F9 to easy ease. On our start keyframe, I'm going to highlight the back handle here and drag it all the way to the front, and the same with this end keyframe. All right, now looking at my notes, I know that this is gonna wanna animate in, or it's gonna look best animating in around the 5-second mark. So we'll just go to our working comp and see how this looks and sounds.
Teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum. Universities, this was the classroom.
Maybe just back it up just a little bit.
This was the classroom, For universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
And then with this final call out, I'll just bring this up a little bit.
Classroom, and conversation was the curriculum. Room, and conversation was the curriculum. This was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
The lines look great. Now it's time to jump on to the next thing. So at the very start of our comp, we have our philosopher animated, and he starts off black and white, and everything else is in color. And what I want to do is actually kind of do the same kind of treatment that we did with our philosopher with our background, just so when he's in for this tight shot, he just stands out a little bit more. So we're going to jump back into our background here. I'm going to duplicate this, and then we'll hide the top one. And with this bottom one, I'm going to add a black and white effect. And then I'm going to add a levels effect. And then all I'm going to do is just adjust some of these values here. Okay. Now we brought in 2 of our different Luma mats before. We used Luma Mat 4 to animate in the Philosopher. We're going to use Luma Mat 1 from the mat pack that I will link in the description below to reveal our colored background. So real quick, this is how this is going to animate in. Just all out from the center, and it has these nice fine edges here, so it's going to kind of bleed on. So with that, I'm just going to call this background color. I'll change the color of this to orange, and then I'm going to mat it to the mat itself. And what I want to do is now align the timing. Where do I want to have this show? Oh, and the other thing, keep in mind, we have to extend the end of it. Otherwise, it's going to just drop off. So I'm going to right-click, time, freeze the last frame. So I'm going to go to our main comp here and just see how, when we actually want to start showing the color of the new background.
Universities, this was the class.
All right, so it's really good. It's like right before things change, which I like, but I just want to bump it up just the slightest bit. So I'm going to bump it up like a couple frames, like this.
Before universities, this was the class.
That animates on perfectly. It gives us just a little bit of anticipation right before the shot changes, and we're going to emphasize that just a little bit more with a fun little trick I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. We're going to call this Camera Lens Blur. I'm going to go to our camera controller 1 here, and I know that our transition now happens here, where things go to a wide cut. So I'm going to go to our camera lens blur here. I'm going to add the camera lens blur effect, and I'm going to change this to something like 8. Set a keyframe here, click U, and then go up, let's say 8 keyframes. Change that to 0, go down 8 keyframes. Change that to 0 as well. I'm going to highlight the keyframes, and then I'm going to click F9 to easy ease, and here's how this looks.
Universities, this was the class.
It's just that little touch that makes it look that much better. So we're going to keep moving along here, and what we're going to do now is add just a little subtle grid effect that I've done in several other videos, but we're going to make this one a little bit different. So I'm going to go to our assets here. I'm going to go to Composition New. We're going to label this grid. We'll change the background color back to black too. Okay, now what I'm going to do is add a solid. Doesn't matter what color. We're going to add the grid effect. Change the default settings from corner point to width slider. We're going to change the width to 95, and we're going to just shrink down this border, something like 3. Okay, and we'll call this grid. We're going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this grid dots. We'll hide our grid for now. With our grid dots, what I'm going to do is invert the grid, and then I'm actually going to increase the border. And right away, we get these little dots. Just a fun different way to kind of differentiate how to use this effect. So now when I turn on both, we have these dots perfectly in the middle. Now what I want to do is actually not have dots in the middle, but on the corners of these boxes. So it's really easy to get this done. I'm just going to bring over the anchor, and I'm going to bring it up and bring it back maybe 1. Okay, now what I want to do is highlight both layers, click P for position. So what we're going to do now is actually parent the position parameter to the position of the dots. Not the layers, but the position parameters. They're different. So it's very important that you do this. I'm going to parent this to the position of the dots. So now everything in the grid is going to align with what we do with the grid dots position. I'm going to hold down Alt, click on the grid dots position, and I'm going to type in an expression, posterized time 3, followed by wiggle 2, 3. Now there's going to be this subtle little shaking that's going on. Okay, cool. We got everything looking the way that we want it to be. So now we're gonna go back to our working comp. We're going to add our grid effect right here. Now with this grid effect, I'm gonna change it to 3D. It's gonna look super large, but just stick with me here. I'm gonna push it back in Z-space to 7,000. So it's gonna be behind the call out. It's gonna be behind the Philosopher since that's at 5,000, but it's still in front of the background. I'm gonna scale this back up. And then now what I'm gonna do is change the blend mode to something like classic color dodge. So right away, this is way too noticeable for my liking. So I'm gonna go back into our grid here. I'm gonna change the border to 1. You could barely see it in here. You could barely see it in there. And then with the actual grid dots, I'm gonna change that to something like 94. Go back. Okay, it's looking a little bit more subtle. And then with this, I'm gonna drop the opacity to something like 50. So it's really subtle in the entire edit itself. It's not supposed to be something that, you know, completely consumes the actual look of the edit, but it adds just a little bit of aesthetic and a little bit of texture, which is why I like to use it. So that's just another little tip that we're adding some sauce to. Next thing we're gonna do is go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and we're going to label this Posterize. We're going to add the Posterize Time effect, and we're going to drop this to 12. And what this is gonna do is make it, the animation itself, look a lot more like stop motion and a little bit more choppy, which is exactly what we're going for. And then what we're gonna do in addition to putting this as an adjustment layer, since we pre-comped a lot of things, we're gonna go into things like our call out, and we're going to paste it on our assets. So do the same thing here. And then with our circle stroke, we will paste it on everything. And we already have an expression on our grid, so we're good there. So, and then our background, paste it on everything there. And we'll even do our Philosopher. So you can see right away things are starting to look a little bit more choppy, but like I said, there's still more work to be done. Now it's time for our last piece of sauce, and that is using the puppet pin tool. Because right now with our Philosopher, he has his arm sticking out. So I see an opportunity there for some subtle movement there, and then also maybe with his head a little bit. So we're gonna have some fun, and I'm gonna show you guys how to use this really fun tool. And to set ourselves up the easiest way possible, I'm going to have this not matted to anything, and then I'm just gonna go to the very start of our composition here, and I'm going to pull out this puppet pin tool. And when it comes to photos or images, you wanna look for things like people waving or pointing, and that will allow you to add some subtle animation like what we're doing. So I'm gonna set a point here, and it's gonna create a keyframe when I click U right away. And I'm gonna set a point here. Now the thing is that I can't move just this arm like this, because as you can see, the whole Philosopher is moving around, and we don't want that. We want just his arm to move. So what I need to do is actually set keyframes throughout the entire body, and so that way I have more control of certain parts of it and everything else stays where it needs to be. So I'm gonna set a point there, set a point there, and then with our head and neck, I'm gonna set some points here. And then now I could have a little bit more control. But there's still some movement going on, right, within the body. So in order to combat that, I'm going to set points throughout everywhere. And like I said, a keyframe is added every time you set one of these points. So now we have all of these little points here, but we're not animating them all. We're only gonna animate 2 points, this point and this point. So now that I know that keyframes are set every time we set a point, we already have a keyframe selected. So I'm gonna go down to the 1 second mark here, and I'm going to move this down just a little bit. And then with the head, I'm gonna just push it back like he's nodding. Okay, it's really subtle, but now when I go down, I see, okay, this is the head, and then this is the arm. Now what I wanna do is go to the 2 second mark, take our first keyframes, and paste them back there. So now we have this little subtle movement. So this is looking all right. What I wanna do is actually probably push this back to like 2 seconds long for each keyframe. Let's see how this looks now. Yeah, that's looking good. Now what I want to do is click on all of our keyframes here, and I'm going to click F9 to easy ease them, and we're just going to leave it the default easing. I'm going to hold down Alt, I'm going to click on a position here, and I'm going to type in this expression, loop out. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, loop out. So now, rather than putting keyframes everywhere, it's going to just continuously loop that little subtle movement that we're doing. All right, this looks great, but what we need to do now is actually take this effect, and we need to copy it and paste it on our bottom Philosopher. That way, when the black and white one animates in, he's also doing that same little animation, so it's all matches. Pasted that there. Now what I want to do is matte this back to where it's supposed to be, and now let's take a look at just this Philosopher real quick. That looks so good. All right, so let's take a final look at this edit.
This philosopher wasn't just talking, he was teaching. Before universities, this was the classroom, and conversation was the curriculum.
That looks so good. Man, I'm so happy with the way this edit turned out. Everything that we put into it was some really unique special treatment, and that puppet pen tool just ties it all together. Like I said, the project file will be in the description below, so please be sure to check that out. And this is how you make a fun Johnny Harris-style animation.